What's up, everyone? It's another episode of the Inside the Lines podcast. It's me, your host, Isaac, and we're back again to kind of recap what we've seen the past couple of days. The first 2 days of the NBA playoffs, or technically 3 days of the NBA playoffs, are now in the books, and it's been an interesting 3 days to say the least. It's been a lot of blowouts here. The home team, not a whole lot of variety. The home teams have won every single game thus far, but we did get some good games last night. So speaking of that, without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to get things started in Cleveland, where the Cavs played host to the Orlando Magic the first two games of this series and hold currently a 2-0 series lead over the Orlando Magic. Game one is what we're going to focus on first, and in game one, the Cavaliers took it 97-83. They led the entire way, and the story of the game is Donovan Mitchell, right? One of the things that we said coming into this series was that Donovan Mitchell was the best player in this series, and he needed to play like it. He needed to show up, and in game one, he certainly did so. 30 points, 11 for 21 from the field, 3 of 8 from 3. He played very, very well, but he wasn't alone. Jared Allen, 16 points, 18 rebounds, a theme you're going to see when we take a look at game two. Evan Mobley, 16 and 11. Cleveland, get this, out-rebounded Orlando 54-40 and held Orlando under 20 points in the second and third quarters. Look at things at the Orlando side. Paolo Banchero finished with 24 and 7 with 5 assists in his playoff debut. Shot over 50% from the field, 2 of 7 from three-point range. The story for Orlando has to be their inability to shoot the basketball, right? They really, really struggled specifically from three. Remember, coming into this series, we also discussed the fact that Orlando wasn't a very good three-point shooting team, specifically against Cleveland this season, but they shot well below the numbers that they put up in the regular season, 21% from three, and then shot 63% from the free throw line. And you remember another thing that I said was going to be key in this matchup was the paint battle, and they lost that battle 48-36. So in game one, not a whole lot that went right for Orlando. And one of the things that we're going to see is a theme of them scoring under 90 points in both games. Scored 83 in game one and 86 in game two. But game one wasn't a pretty showing for them. Moving on to game two. More of the same from Orlando here in game two. Shooting woes kind of continued. Shot 36% from the field and 26% from three, struggling shooting the basketball as well as being out-rebounded on the glass again for the second straight game. This time the margin wasn't as wide. It was a 48-41 rebounding battle advantage to the Cavaliers, led by big man Jared Allen. Allen grabbed, get this, 20 rebounds in game two, in addition to the 18 that he grabbed in game one. And these rebounds in part gave way to the 18 second chance points that the Cavs were able to amass in this game against Orlando. As of those 20 rebounds, 9 of them came on the offensive glass for Jared Allen. Taking a look, though, at Donovan Mitchell, not as stellar as he was in game one. Had 23 as opposed to the 30 that he had in game one. Shot 9 for 22 from the field, 2 for 10 from three. So a little less efficient from Donovan Mitchell. Jared Allen, in addition to his rebounding efforts, put in 16 points, shot 6 of 10 from the field. Evan Mobley, 17 points, 7 boards, and hit a 3. So this is the second straight game Evan Mobley has hit a 3 or more, which is an interesting development for Cleveland going forward in this postseason. Cleveland led by as many as 22 in this game and held Orlando to under 90 points for the second straight game. Another observation I wanted to shed some light on here in this series, I wanted to key in a little bit more on Paolo Banchero once again. Looking at this matchup for Banchero, doing a deep dive into the statistics, matchup data based off NBA.com's matchup data, when you observe Paolo Banchero and when he's been defended by Evan Mobley. Mobley has held Banchero to 2 of 11 shooting on in 45 possessions during the series, and he's forced 4 turnovers against Banchero. So Banchero struggling a little bit when defended upon by Evan Mobley. In game 1, I was kind of surprised to a degree of how much Mobley and or Okoro were not on Banchero in that game. Biggerstaff decided to employ the services of George Niang, who wasn't as stout defensively as Mobley, evidenced by the decrease in field goal percentage in Game 2. I like the switch of going with Okoro or more so Mobley in that matchup for Banchero, and it seems to have paid a little bit of dividends for them. Another thing I've noticed, another observation I've seen is how head coach Jamal Mosley has decided to not utilize the services of Jalen Suggs, who suffered a scary injury earlier on in that game on Donovan Mitchell. He's had Suggs play a little bit more on Darius Garland, and I'm curious to see if going forward they change up that matchup. But the series as a whole, going forward, before this series began, I had picked the Cavaliers to win this series in 7, and to be honest, I'm losing a little bit of confidence in that prediction. Not in a negative way that I don't believe the Cavaliers will win, but it's looking like in these first 2 games, maybe they'll win in less than 7, maybe 6. Orlando has really struggled to score the basketball, has really struggled to shoot at a reasonable percentage, sub 40% field goal shooting nights in back-to-back games, and you have to wonder, in addition to that, if they'll ever be able to have a decent shooting night from 3 as well. Now, going home, there's always the concept of home cooking, right? When you're around your home fans, you tend to play a little bit better. The role players that were struggling on the road, the bench players that have been to this point non-existent, like Cole Anthony and others, maybe they come alive in Orlando going forward in Game 3. But the key for them is to figure out that lull or those shooting woes that they're going through in this series to this point. The bench contributions need to be better. They're one of the better bench teams in the league this season, or at least a lot better than the bench Cleveland had this year. And Paolo Banchero to this point and Franz Wagner have both, more so Banchero, especially in Game 2, have both been ineffective against this Cavalier defense. So the experience and the physicality that Cleveland has brought to the series so far has definitely made a difference. And going back to the Cleveland side of things, I said, look, the best player in the series, being Donovan Mitchell, has to show up and play like the best player in the series. And so far through the first 2 games, he has done that. He has shown why he's the best player in this series to this point. Another thing for Cleveland that I think has been beautiful to watch, in addition to Donovan playing as well as he has, is the domination in the paint and on the glass. Cleveland has owned the painted area and the rebounding battle. And so that experience and that physicality has been key, right? I think they took a hard lesson from that series a year ago in New York and are definitely applying it here. And in a way, it's almost as if Orlando is looking like Cleveland did last year, and Cleveland is looking like New York did last year in that series. So to this point, I really do believe Cleveland hangs on and still wins this series. Nothing has changed my opinion on that. Perhaps maybe the number of games it takes, but to this point, I don't have any reservations about how this series will go down. I'll stick to 7. Maybe Orlando plays better at home, but obviously if they lose Game 3, that will do them in for the series. So moving on now to the next series I wanted to discuss, New York and Philadelphia. Now, coming into the series, obviously this isn't a series preview, but I did want to kind of give some keys to this series going in before I assessed what's happened so far and what I think will happen going forward. Taking a look at how, these 2 teams fared this season, and I highlighted those important categories again: rebounding, bench points, and paint points. And looking at New York and how they fared this season, they were third in rebounding, 27th in bench points, and 19th in paint points per game. And looking at Philly, they were 23rd in rebounds per game, 23rd in bench points per game, and 14th in paint points per game. And if you take a look at both these teams, not strong benches coming into this series, not expecting a whole lot coming from bench production. New York, though, a key for them, they were the number one offensive rebounding team this season. Coming into this series now, they'll carry that over, and we'll see how that's played a role in everything so far. And for Philadelphia, they were fourth in free throw attempts per game, and we're going to take a look at how that has played out in itself in this series to this point. And going forward for the head-to-head matchups, how they've looked when they fared when they've played one another. New York took the season series, won it 3-1, and averaged 104 points per game, and only allowed almost a little over 86.5 points per game. So you take a look at it, New York has fared very well against Philadelphia. They've held them to under 100 points in every meeting so far this season, or up in the regular season coming into the postseason, and did a very good job of lowering that field goal percentage that they had coming into the year, or the field goal percentage that they had this season, and they lowered that field goal percentage, that 3-point field goal percentage as well. So you take a look at how New York has fared against Philly. It's been pretty well so far. So taking a look at game one and how game one shook out, a very hard-fought affair. Jalen Brunson pitched in 22 for New York's win. They got a win in game one, and the story for me personally, looking at how New York played, is looking at the bench. They outscored Philly's bench 42-7. Miles McBride had 21 alone off the bench, 5 for 7 from 3. So the bench off rip coming into an effect of this series, and seeing how that played out. And then, looking at the rebounding battle, Philadelphia lost the rebounding battle to New York 41-66, and lost the free throw battle 22-28. They did shoot 92%, but their strength in shooting the free throw was not exploited here in game one. Tyrese Maxey finished with 33, 4 assists. He shot 40 for 26 from the field, 3 for 9 from 3. Embiid had his own 29 points. He shot 11 of 12 from the free throw line, but did not shoot well from the field. He is something I'm coming back to going forward, as well as his injury status is key in this series as well. But another thing I wanted to highlight for New York, look at Josh Hart on the glass. 13 boards. He shot 4 of 8 from 3. He is really turning himself into a great rebounding guard for New York. And I think going forward, that's something we need to keep an eye on. As if you take a look at game two, Knicks now, they took this game in kind of a wild scramble towards that late game, or in that late game scrum, where Tyrese Maxey received the inbound and lost it and turned it over in the final seconds. In that game, New York went on an 8-0 run in the final 27 seconds, capped off by a Dante DiVincenzo three-pointer off of an Isaiah Hartenstein offensive rebound. So through the first two games, New York has been exploiting the offensive glass, and I think that has been key for why they are ahead in this series. Tyrese Maxey finished with 35, 10 assists, went 12 for 22 from the field, 5 for 11 from 3. Joel Embiid went 12 for 29 from the field, finished with 34 points and 10 rebounds. Rest of the team only scored 35 points, and they lost the free throw battle again, in addition to losing the paint battle. So for the first two games of this series, New York has dominated inside, and their benches come to play in one of the two games at the very least. And then look at Josh Hart again on the glass, 21 points and 15 boards, 4 for 7 from 3. Again, Brunson shot 8 for 29 from the field, but did have his usual 24 points and had 8 rebounds himself. So taking a look at how New York has exploited this series to this point, I think that they've done a good job on the offensive glass. They've done a good job controlling the paint, and they've done a good job slowing down Embiid to an extent. He's still getting the points, the amount of points that he scores, but at the same time, he's not doing a good job of having a level of efficiency that he's had throughout the course of the regular season, but that could also be attributed to the injury that he has sustained as well. However, with all that withstanding and Philadelphia being in this 0-2 hole, do they still have an opportunity to come back and make this a series? And that being said, I wanted to take a look at the keys to this series and started off the bat with number one, Joel Embiid, right? Their best player, Joel Embiid, and his health are paramount to this series. Philadelphia this year, when Embiid was playing, he hurt that meniscus back on January 30th. But Philadelphia, when Joel Embiid was playing, had a 29-16 record before he got injured in that Golden State game on January 30th. Had a 29-16 record and were third in the East, right? And somehow found a way to slip all the way down to the 7th seed when he had gotten hurt, or after he had gotten hurt, had found a way to slip from 3rd down to 7th. So he's a key and pivotal piece for their squad. And, I mean, you can see those numbers up there. Why, right? He averaged 34.7, almost 35 points a game this season, shot 53% from the field, 38.6% from 3 and 11 boards altogether. So his health is important. And thus far in this series, I think part of the reason they're in this 0-2 hole is how he's looked. He's looked a little ginger and gimpy and not as sharp as he normally does. And I think that in itself is slowing him down for the Knicks to a degree, right? So Embiid's health is going to be important to see how that looks going forward and what that's going to continue to look like. But he's definitely the best player in the series when healthy. You know, I'll put that asterisk there, when healthy. And the question now is, how good can he really be with how hampered and how hurt he is at this point? So next guy has got to be Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey, who played at an all-star level this season, specifically against New York, though. He averaged 26.3 points per game. Not terrible. Shot 44.8% from the field, 45%. I'll round that up. 33.3% from 3 and averaged 6 assists. So shooting the ball wasn't as efficient, especially from 3. Not his normal self when playing New York so far this season, but he has to play well. But I mean, to this point in the series, he's averaging over 30. So he's given you what they need from Philadelphia. So yes, despite those two, what other factors, because that's the two-headed snake for them, the two biggest pieces of their team are those two stars, right? So despite those two, what else can Philly do to have a level of success in addition to those two playing at that high of a level? Well, they had to get to the free throw line. They were the 4th highest shooting free throw team this year in the league this past regular season, and thus far in the series, they've been outshot from the free throw line by New York. Last game it was 1. The game before, I believe, it was 6. So they need to get to the foul line. They need to shoot better from 3. Their percentages need to be better from 3. They have to be able to shoot the 3 ball a little bit more consistently in a higher clip. And then on top of that, they need more production from their bench. Buddy Hield has not been what he was in the regular season. Thus far, I don't think he's made a 3-pointer. At least he didn't make one in game 2. So he's got to be able to find that range, find that rhythm, and get going from 3. And then number 4, or not even number 4, the last point specifically here has to be keeping New York off the offensive glass. They were the number 1 offensive rebounding team this season. So it's going to be key to make sure that they can keep them off the offensive glass. If they can secure those defensive rebounds and not give New York extra possessions, they will have an opportunity in this series. So take a look at the New York side as well. Jalen Brunson, he is New York's best player, and it's very nip and tuck to determine who is the best player in this series if Embiid is not 100% between him and Maxey. But a lot of individuals had Jalen Brunson in MVP conversations, right? With how well New York had played up until this point and securing the number 2 seed in the East, a lot of folks felt as though Brunson should definitely be considered in that MVP conversation. And in the season series against Philadelphia, he averaged 22.3 points. He didn't shoot particularly well, and that has been consistent thus far into the series against Philly. He shot 8 for 29 in game 2, so he hasn't shot the ball entirely well against Philly. He still has some level of success scoring, just not at an efficient clip. And on top of that, he averaged 7 assists, 7.8 assists, 8 assists. So he played very well, got his teammates involved. And I think that is key in this series in terms of if he can play better, right? A lot of basketball analysts believe that he will eventually play better, and I'm not sold on that fact because at the end of the day, he hasn't ever really shot the ball well against Philly so far this season. I think the size of Philly's defense definitely bothers him, going from guys like Kyle Lowry to at times maybe Kelly Oubre. They've done a good job. Nick Batum, others, putting those guys on, not Kyle Lowry, excuse me, Jalen Brunson has, I think, produced and yielded some results to an extent. But after Brunson, it's got to be Josh Hart. Josh Hart has been so key to New York's success, specifically in this series. And I want to bring attention to that rebounding number, 14.3 rebounds a game for a guy his size is remarkable, especially in the postseason. And this isn't the first time he's done this. Last season in the playoffs, he did a great job on the glass for New York as well. So you really have to evaluate how well Josh Hart has played in addition to shooting the 3 ball at a relatively consistent clip so far in the playoffs. He did not do that well in the regular season versus Philadelphia. So it's going to be very, very key going forward and making sure that he can keep that level of consistency going forward on the glass. But outside of those two, right, what is New York's keys to this series? And thus far, right, it's been slowing down Embiid and Maxey. Now, Maxey has still played relatively well. He's had to work for it, but he's played relatively well. And Embiid hasn't been himself due to the injury and how hampered he is. But that is key number one. Number two, they have to control the glass and the paint, and they've done so thus far in this series. Consistent bench scoring, right? Deuce McBride coming in off the bench and scoring 21 in game 1 is exactly what they need to have success in this series, especially with Julius Randle done for the year. And Jalen Brunson has to be great. He hasn't been great so far. So to this point in the series, it hasn't really mattered because of the fact that that bench has come in and helped them play well, in addition to how they've rebounded the ball on the offensive side of the glass. So I think with those with those factors coming into this series, those were the most important things for both these teams to have in order for them to have success. Looking at the coaches for both teams, Nick Nurse in his first season with the Sixers has an overall 274, 198 record and is overall 25-17 in the postseason. Remember, he won that championship with the Toronto Raptors back in 2019. And on the other side, it's Tom Thibodeau, right? 4th season with New York. Overall, 527 and 389 record. This is his 9th playoff appearance, and he's a 32 and 41 playoff record. Last season, beating the Cavs, upsetting the Cavs in round 1 and losing to Miami in round 2. So they're back again. So going forward, with all that withstanding, we're taking a look at my prediction before the series and whether or not I have confidence in it. I predicted before this series that Philly would take it in 6. I'm not as confident in it now, personally, but at the same time, I'm not wavering off that pick. I do think Philly still has the best player in this series. I do think Philly still has a superior bench that will play better at home when they get there for game 3. And I think those elements, in addition to the fact that I think that they'll get to the foul line a little bit more, being at home, getting the home whistle, I think they have an opportunity to at least come back and tie the series and maybe make it a series going into New York for game 5. And, these last two games have been relatively nip and tuck, pretty close. Last game was very close. If New York doesn't go on that 8-0 run to close out that fourth quarter, the Knicks probably go on to lose that game, or in Philly, ties it at 1-1, and then not to even mention the fact that game one themselves, they felt like they should have won as well. So I think, you get the role players rolling at home, you get them feeling themselves. You take one or two, you take game three, and then you take game four, so you tie the series up at 2-2 going back to New York. I think I like your chances potentially of winning that game and closing out the series at home. Like I said, I'm not as confident in that prediction, because if you look at the New York side, rebounding is key, and they've done a great job at consistently staying on that offensive glass and creating those second chance points, and they've done a good job slowing down Philly's stars. I say slowing down because I take a look at specifically Embiid and how inefficient he has been in this series so far. Shooting 12 for 29 from the field and shooting 8 for 22 from the field. And this is a guy who shot, as we saw earlier, 53% from the field all season. So they've done a good job reducing his efficiency. But like I said, is that a product of how New York is defending him, or is that a product of the injury that he sustained later in the year? So it's going to be interesting to see how they finish out this series, but I do want to stay 10 toes down with my pick, and I'll take Philly in 6 games. We'll see how that transpires and revisit it to a degree after game 3. Moving on to the final series that I wanted to discuss. It is that 2-7 matchup in the West between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Denver Nuggets. This series, the Nuggets currently lead 2-0, but before we dive into how the series has gone to this point, I kind of wanted to take a step back and look at how these two fared in the regular season. Denver, taking a look at their side, had 114.7 points per game, ranked 16th, ranked 6th in points allowed per game, 7th in rebounds per game, 4th in field goal percentage, 10th in three-point field goal percentage, so top 10 in the league in shooting that three ball, 25th in bench points, not a strong bench for Denver, and 5th in paint points. But get this, they were the third most clutch team in the regular season this season. And on to the LA side, the Lakers ranked 6th in points per game, 23rd in points allowed, not the greatest defense this season from LA, 19th in rebounds per game, 2nd in field goal percentage, so shot the ball pretty decently, and 8th, so they finished within the top 10 of shooting the three as well, 28th, not a great bench, 28th in bench points, and then 2nd in paint points. So in addition to that, the best clutch team in the NBA this year. So these are two super clutch teams, honestly a little similar in terms of how much success they had shooting the ball as well, because in addition to the fact that both benches aren't the strongest. So it's going to be interesting to see how that has played out so far. So to this point in the series, these numbers here are indicative of the first 2 games. Remember, Denver has a 2-0 series lead so far, and they won the season series 3-0 when they played head-to-head. Denver's points per game average has dropped a touch, went from 114 to 107. The Lakers themselves have also dropped to a significant degree, going from 117 to 101. And in that as well, the Lakers' field goal percentage has also taken a dip, being one of the best field goal shooting teams this season. They've dipped to a certain degree so far in these first 2 games. They haven't controlled the paint as well as Denver has so far this series. Their bench has been anemic to this point, not strong at all, but so has Denver's. Pretty consistent what we saw in the regular season. And the three-point percentage has dropped a touch. So thus far in the series, what sticks out to me is that paint point differential, right? The Nuggets are outscoring the Lakers in the paint thus far in the series by an average of 13 through these first 2 games. And Another thing as well that Denver's had success with is outscoring the Lakers in the second half, a total of a combined 114-83 in this series so far. So kind of a nice little quick outlook into the series and how things have gone so far. One last thing, though, before we move on, and that I wanted to bring attention to are the leads the Lakers have given up so far in this series through two games. Held a 12-point lead in game one, gave that up, and held a 20-point lead in game two, and gave that up as well. Moving forward to the keys in this series, or the X factors in this series, we're going to start with the Lakers first, and it's the two-headed snake, right? The two-headed snake of the combination of Anthony Davis and LeBron James. LeBron James so far in this series giving the Lakers great numbers, giving the Lakers 26.5 points per game, 54.3% shooting from the field, 54.5% shooting from three, along with 10 assists in these first two games. Anthony Davis, through these first two games, are giving the Lakers 32 points, 61.9% from the field, 2.5 blocks per game, and 14 rebounds per game as well. And you're looking at these numbers, you're probably like, man, how are the Lakers down 0-2 in this series so far? Well, we'll take a look at what Denver has done better, right? They've controlled the glass better on both ends, right? They've gotten second chance points from their offensive rebounds, and also have out-rebounded the Lakers in the first two games, but the Lakers need to find a way to limit those second chance points. Denver has controlled the paint, right? They've done a good job of making sure that they've outscored the Lakers in the paint so far this series, and finally, they have found a way to eliminate the Lakers' consistency going into the second half somehow. The Lakers need to find a way to sustain second halves that they haven't been able to do up until this point so far in this series. Taking a look at things from Denver's perspective, though, Nikola Jokic is the guy, right? He is the de facto not only best player in this series, best player in the league, right? He's averaging 29.5 points per game off 61.5 shooting, 61.5% shooting from the field, 42.9 shooting from three, averaging 8.5 assists per game, along with 16 boards per game as well, dominating thus far in this series. Jamal Murray, maybe not dominating, but still having an impact, as he hasn't shot the ball as well as he normally does, averaging 21 off 37.5 shooting from the field, and a low three-point percentage, 28.9% from three through these first two games, and 7.5 assists. So not a great showing from him thus far, which should have you as a Lakers fan concerned going forward, because they've been able to win these first two games with him not playing super well. But that's partly due to the fact of not just Jokic, but the guy by the name of Michael Porter Jr., right? He's giving them 20.5 points per game off 57.1% shooting from the field and 53% shooting from three in these first two games. He's given them also 8.5 boards per game as well. So Denver, the reason I didn't have a keys to the series for them to a degree is because effectively they need to beat the Lakers at what the Lakers are effectively struggling with, right? Both teams need to control those elements of the series, and thus far Denver has dominated in those areas, right? They've controlled the glass, they've gotten their own second chance points while limiting the Lakers' second chance points. They've controlled the paint, and they've had consistency when it really matters in the second half. So Denver, to me, do they really need keys to the series based off how they've had this 2-0 lead? The Lakers are led by their head coach, Darvin Ham. This is his second stint with the team, or first stint with the team, but second season with the team. He has an overall 90-74 record, an 8-10 playoff record overall. And last season they were swept by this Denver team. So let's do the math here, folks. Swept last season, that's 4 games, not to mention the last regular season game they played that season was a loss. That's 5 games there. Lost again 3 straight games coming into the year, right? So that's now 8, and then lost 2 more with these first 2 games. So this Denver Nuggets team has beat the Lakers 10 straight times. 10 straight times, so it doesn't bode well for the Lakers going forward in this series. But let's take a look at how this series has unfolded so far. Going into game one here, first the Nuggets were able to snatch the victory in game one. Obviously, they're up 2-0, but in game one, they won it in a double-digit fashion, scoring 114 to 103. On Denver's side, they were led by Nikola Jokic with 32 and 12. Gave them shot 15 of 23 from the field, 103 from three, and 7 assists as well. Jamal Murray himself gave them 22 points, went 4 of 9 from the field, and gave them 10 assists. And Michael Porter Jr., 19 points, 8 boards, 8 for 15 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3. So in this game, the difference, once again, like I mentioned before, was that second half dominance. They outscored the Lakers 32 to 18 in the third quarter and dominated the Lakers in the paint 64 to 54. Looking at the Lakers side of things, Anthony Davis led the way with 32 points and 14 boards, shot 12 for 23 from the field, and got 4 blocks as well. Next, LeBron James had 27 and 6 along with 8 assists, 10 for 16 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. But I think that the key here is those 7 turnovers, right? He had 7 turnovers in this game that I think kind of allowed Denver to get back into the game after the Lakers established that 12-point lead. Next, it's D'Angelo Russell, and I highlighted his numbers because he didn't play particularly well in this one. Shot 6 for 20 from the field. So, the Lakers, they led for most of the way in the first half, gave up that lead, but they had 12 turnovers as a team, right? And I think that's what gave Denver their level of success that they had in the second half. Moving on to game 2, and this, folks, was the game of the night for me. I really, really enjoyed watching this one. The Nuggets took this one 101 to 99, and the Lakers in this game held a 20-point lead, and gave it up in the final seconds of the game by a buzzer-beating mid-range jumper, heavily contested by Jamal Murray, to win the game and go up 2-0 in this series. So how did this game go down? Well, Nikola Jokic gave Denver 27 and 20 off 9 for 15 field goal shooting, right, and gave them 2 for 4 from 3 with 10 assists, a triple-double, a very, very impressive one at that, 20 boards. Wow. Michael Porter Jr. pitched in, gave the Nuggets 22 as well with 8 boards, shot 8 for 13 from the field, 6 for 10 from 3. And then Jamal Murray, he didn't play once again or shoot the ball particularly well, went 9 for 24 once again from the field, 0 for 5 from 3, and gave them 5 assists. But take a look at this. The second half dominance by Denver on display once again, outscored the Lakers 57 to 40 in the second half, 33 to 20 in the fourth quarter, and that Jamal Murray buzzer-beating mid-range jumper sealed it for them. Meanwhile, on the LA side, once again, these numbers are impressive, right? 32 from Anthony Davis with 11 boards. He went 14 for 19 from the field. LeBron James chipped in 26, 8 boards, and 12 assists off 9 for 19 shooting from the field, 3 for 6 from 3, and he cut that turnover number from 7 to 2, right? So had 7 of the 12 Laker turnovers in this game and only had 2 in game 2. So then D'Angelo Russell even chipped in. Remember, I highlighted he went 6 for 20 in game 1. In game 2, gave them 23 and 6 assists off 8 for 16 from the field, 7 threes, 7 of 11 from three-point range. The Lakers led after every quarter and led by 10 going into the third, or going from the third to the fourth, and lost. Led by as many as 20 points and lost that game. Shot 48.7% from the field, 43% from 3, compared to Denver, who shot 44% from the field and 23.5% from 3. I say that because it's like the Lakers, they could not have almost played any better. If you take a look at how this unfolded, they played very well, and Jamal Murray did not play very well at all, and they still found a way to lose this game. And going forward in my series prediction, it factors in, as to this point the Nuggets hold that 2-0 lead, and coming into this series I had Denver picked to win in 5 games, and I am confident that Denver will still win the series. It's just the number of games now. Did I give the Lakers too many and giving them just one? But, I do think they can still steal one. I think maybe they take game 3 or game 4. But I think this series is effectively over. Denver's ability to dominate in the second half is just so key to me. The way that they can control the inside with the rebounding and the scoring in the paint is something that I believe is key in any postseason series, specifically this one as well. And they have the best player in the league. Right? Nikola Jokic is the best player in the league, and I may be prisoner of the moment, but he might be the best, not best, but most skilled big we've ever seen in the NBA. So, those things that Denver has going for them makes it really hard for me to believe that they'll lose more than a game in this series. And if you're the Lakers, what do you need to do to find success? Well, find a way to sustain that second half, or that first half success into the second half, right? They do a good job going into the half with these leads, and then for whatever reason, in the third quarters, where they've been outscored, specifically in game 132 to 18, and then in the second half total, losing the second half battle 114 to 83 points. It makes you really, really think all they need to do is figure out a way to sustain first half success in the second half. But that's easier said than done against this team. And when you take a look at it from that perspective, I think it's very, very much looking likely that the Nuggets take this in 5. All in all, though, it's been a pretty fun first couple of days of the NBA postseason to this point, right? And before we go, I wanted to take a look at the NBA playoff outlook to this point between both conferences as we continue this journey towards the NBA Finals. Taking a look at the east side of the bracket first. Boston was able to take their first game against Miami. Cleveland, as we discussed earlier, 2-0 lead against Orlando. Milwaukee took their first game against Indy, and New York, of course, with their 2-0 lead that we discussed against Philly. Going back to the West, OKC in that 1-8 matchup took their first game against New Orleans. The Clippers won in dominant fashion, but almost an entertaining little bit of a comeback. We'll unpack that going forward as well. But took game 1 against Dallas, and in the 3-6 matchup between the Timberwolves and Suns, Minnesota took game 1. And finally, what we discussed literally just now, the Lakers trail the Denver Nuggets 0-2. So, like I said, a fun playoff outlook to this point. And going forward, it's going to be exciting to see what goes on next. But thank you for making it this far with me. Once again, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and let me know if you think my predictions are still spot on based off what's gone on in these first couple of days of the postseason. And let me know if you think I'm wrong. And, let's just have some nice basketball discourse in the comments. And going forward, in the next video, we'll unpack 3 games that happened in the next day going forward, which would be Dallas and the Clippers, along with Milwaukee and Indiana, and then finally Minnesota and Phoenix. So we'll unpack that next time, but until next time, I hope you continue to keep it inside the lines.